Welcome, sir, in this 5 day there's FTP on enabling technologies for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IoT. On behalf of the organizing committee and Department Computer Engineering, I welcome you, sir, in this session. And let me give, uh, at present, we have around 90 participants, and I have dropped the message in the WhatsApp group. They are continuously increasing numbers. So quickly, let me introduce our today's resource person, Dr. Zahid Raza, who is working as associate professor in the School of Computer and System Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University since 2004. He is MSc in electronics as well as completed his MTech in computer science from Birla Institutes of Technology, Mesra, and PhD in computer science from Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has 13 years of teaching experience. Prior to joining JNU, he served as a lecturer in Banastari Vidyapeeth University, Rajasthan. He has published many peer-reviewed articles and has proposed various scheduling models for computational grid, cloud, and cluster systems. He is the author of 2 books, several book chapters, and attended and also organized various national and international conferences. His research interests include parallel and distributed systems, evolutionary algorithms, and multi-objective evolutionary algorithms. He is a member of IEEE. Today, Dr. Zahid will deliver a talk on resource provisioning in cloud computing using auction mechanism. So it's over to you now, sir.
Uh, Thank you so much, sir. And I really regret the inconvenience and the hassle caused to
There is
everyone.
not an issue, sir. We have 2 hour session and participants joined at 10 o'clock, so they have a break of 20 to 25 minutes, and up to 2 p.m. we have sufficient time.
Right. Thank you. So at the outset, let me thank everyone responsible for making this FDP happen. Special thanks to Dr. Abdul Samad. He has been in contact with me since quite some time, and he's taking all the troubles of managing anything and everything. Um, uh, it's needless to say, last 2, 3 months have been really painful to all of us, and my heart goes to all the lives who have been which have been lost during this period. And especially AMU also went through a very troubling time during this time. So my deep condolences for all those people who have really lost their near and dear ones. With that, I would like to start my talk. Basically, I work in the area of tidal and distributed systems. So basically, I would be today talking about resource provisioning and cloud computing uh, using auction mechanism. Basically, in this particular talk, I would be detailing a little about cloud computing and very little about its peers, and then we'll go on to the auction mechanism. Basically, this work is a result of the work done by my student Dinesh Kumar, another student from the department, Gaurav Barnwal, myself, and my colleague, Professor DP Vidyarthi. And I'm the one who is presenting this work today. Okay, so the outline of my presentation is briefly I will give the basic knowledge of cloud and IoT. I'll talk about the cloud peers, will introduce the basic concepts of auction, and the purpose is to imbibe the knowledge on how auction can be used for resource provisioning in cloud computing. Let me first start with cloud computing. Actually, this is since FTP is something I have a previous experience when I took one lecture, similar lecture in Bhartiyar University. People were having varied background. So I just thought of introducing cloud computing in a very basic term from my perspective. So as you all know, basically we are using cloud computing nowadays in each and everything, whether it is accessing the UGC website or your own university website or so. So cloud computing is everywhere. Yeah. As far as the cloud definition is concerned, the most credible definition comes from NIST Group. They say that it is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, and on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computational resources that can be rapidly provisioned and can be rapidly released with minimal management effort. Now, as you are again aware, especially those people from computer science background, that the important concepts or the components regarding cloud computing are it has virtualization, internet technology is the backbone, it offers utility computing, it offers autonomic computing. Ultimately, it makes the long-held dream of utility computing to be made possible with a pay-as-you-go model. Ultimately, what we have already desired is that we should get all the facilities, just like, we get piped water supply, we get electricity at our home, just by plugging into the socket or just by connecting to a water supply line. So, similarly, cloud computing makes it possible that wherever you are, simply you can get connected to computing by simply using your browser and internet connection. The various essential characteristics of cloud computing are it offers on-demand self-service, resource pooling is there, rapid elasticity is there. The most important service models that are used are software as a service. That means some software is being offered to you, platform as a service, and then infrastructure as a service. Anyways, these are very broad classification of service models. Even you can go ahead with people as a service or hardware as a service. You can expand it to any service. More or less, actually, many times cloud service providers offers more than one service to different people at different or maybe at the same time. The deployment models are private cloud is possible, community cloud is possible, public cloud and hybrid clouds are possible. If you want to have a layered look at the cloud services look something like this. At the top, you have the client. Then you start with the next layer to the client as the application layer. In the application layer, you have all the things which are available at the user end that the user can do, but possibly cannot check, possibly cannot change. For example, you might be having email services, you might be having an access to a particular software in which the software is being given to you, but you cannot actually modify it. You may be able to customize it, but not much properties can be changed. Then you have another layer which is known as platform as a service. In the case of platform as a service, the cloud offers you a deployment platform on which the user can deploy their programs or their applications. They can check their applications, they can modify their applications, they can analyze their applications. So in that case, a little command over the platform will be given to the user so that she can develop the programs on their own and can really scrutinize the performance. At the bottom, you have another layer, which is the infrastructure as a service layer. In the case of infrastructure as a service, entire or major part of the infrastructure that you have demanded most probably will be made available to you because cloud is really big, a number of servers are there. In that case, that infrastructure can be used by the user to maybe develop our applications, maybe to use it as their organizational virtual server, or maybe anything else. The entire control of the how the servers will be working, how the communication will take place, which all platforms can be deployed, what all application can be developed, major controls will be given to the user. So as you go towards the top, the rights to the users keep on decreasing. As you go towards the bottom, vice versa happens. As far as the infrastructure is concerned, the infrastructure may vary from computer hardware, it may be computer software, it may be the underlying network which is available along with the communication requirements, and it can be anything per se. This is again a brief of what I have already told. Some of the common examples of these services are, I have already told you, for software as a service with limited options available. You can go ahead with the use like salesforce.com or Google Docs are there. As far as platform as a service is there, the popular platforms which are available are Google App Engine is there, Windows Azure Services platform is there. Then finally, if you talk about infrastructure as a service, Amazon Web Services are there, Microsoft Azure is there, and but the as far as the prominent players are concerned, Amazon is really prominent in the area. This is another way of looking at the cloud services, in which at the top we have the application layer with certain examples, then platform layer, then infrastructure layer, and then the hardware layer. This is just a brief idea given to you people. As far as the various applications and end users are concerned, end users, they only see whatever is being offered to them as a service. So it could be software, platform, or infrastructure as a service. But it is all about the layers, which gives the right to the user what actually they are going to do and what all rights they have to modify the system. As far as the deployment models are there, the cloud deployment models varies from private to public to community to hybrid cloud. Basically, what is a private cloud? Private cloud is something in which, let's say somebody owns an organization and they want to use the services only for their own employees. Then in that case, whatever hardware infrastructure they have set up, whatever platform they have used on top of that, and whatever applications they have developed will be used only by the authorized private users. So it's not like per se, like I'm using, let's say NASA cloud is there. Can I simply go and use the NASA cloud? No, it's not possible until unless I have the proper authorization as far as employee is concerned. Again, as far as AMU cloud is there, or maybe JNU cloud is there, for example, intranet services, they are only available to the private users, those who are part of that organization. But again, you have a certain requirement of the cloud which takes it to the general masses in the form of public cloud. In the case of public cloud, the informations, a little amount of services are made available to the public on the welfare basis, or maybe as a government effort basis, or maybe just as an outreach program. So in that case, the cloud infrastructure will be made available to the general public. It might be owned by the government. It might be owned by any organization which might be offering to advertise their services, or maybe just in the public cause they might be doing. So now, since I've already given you that example of AMU and JNU, can I say that JNU and AMU falls into the category of public cloud? Yes. A part of information is always made available to the public, and a part of information is made available only to the part of the organization or to the employees only. So in that case, we say JNU cloud or AMU cloud or many clouds per se happens to be hybrid cloud, in which public dealing is there and private dealing is there. Even it is possible that you can have something which is known as a community cloud, which is actually a combination of various communities coming together to solve a problem. In that case, what happens is, for example, you may have some security information that needs to be shared. That security information might be shared by different countries. And accordingly, let's say Interpol is there. So what happens is every country will be sharing their information. So a common cloud will be there. But it will be limited as far as the access is concerned. It is possible that the organization or the third party is managing the community cloud. So this is basically a brief overview of that. So do we really use services in cloud in day-to-day basis? Yes, we do that. As far as computer software or professionals are concerned, they use it as hosted desktops. The characteristics are that virtual desktop, it can be accessed from anywhere using the thin client, and certain examples are iOS is there, iCloud is there. Other popular services which are used by us in a day-to-day basis is cloud storage is there, hosted email services are there, And even dynamic servers are there, but they are used more for technical reasons. In general, I would like to say that cloud computing is basically a business paradigm which is equivalent to setting up a shop. That shop is equivalent to offering certain kind of services. So it is possible that a cloud might be offered as a standalone shop in which they are specialized in something. For example, they might be selling mobiles they are selling or electronic items they are selling. But cloud can also be offered as a bouquet of services, just like malls, we say, in which there will be different kind of services, different kinds of users might be using those different kind of services at the same time or at different time, depending on the prices offered and depending on the interest and which kind of services being offered. But ultimately, at this moment of time, I would like to say that why cloud is successful when other paradigms have not been really successful. See, we have seen the evolution of computing in the area of hardware and in the area of software. But the thing is, cloud computing involves business interests. It involves personal interests. So since personal interests are involved, in that case, it's only beneficial for a certain person or organization if they make profit. Until unless a profit is made, the business is not going to survive. So that is the thing that keeps cloud computing moving and it makes it successful. Another advantage of using cloud computing is that it offers you a green computing environment. Now, you would say why cloud is green? See, on one hand, you say you have all the number of users doing something. There are thousands and lakhs of servers at individual places, individual usages under the individual ownership. In that case, what happens is they might be consuming energy quite a lot. But in the case of cloud computing, what will happen? Most of the servers will be available at one place. Many people might be requesting for those services. And depending on that, resources will be provisioned. Those resources, again, I have already said that could be hardware or software or networking component. So what happens is that since cloud offers is based on the use of virtualization, an efficient use of underlying resources is there in the case of cloud. So that makes cloud a little energy efficient. So it's a step towards green computing. Now, it offers higher server utilization and lesser individual use. So ultimately, the carbon footprint or the damage to the environment is decreased to an extent. Further, we say that the data centers are quite optimized for global energy standards and compliances, which is not the case for individual usage. So that says that cloud computing is a step towards green computing. Even one of the very few things which is very important, but which is usually neglected, is easy recycling of e-waste, which can be done in the case of cloud computing, which is again not possible in the case of individual usage. Do we really care about e-waste? No. Some of us might be caring, but many or the major population of especially Asian countries, we do not really care about that. Another indirect effect of using cloud computing is that by the use of remote working, commuting requirements are reduced. If the commuting requirements are reduced, then in that case, what happens is you are not relying on your own vehicle or you are not relying on the public transport. So ultimately, it leads to indirect energy saving. Uh, Last but not the least, even packaging, shipping, etc. can be reduced using cloud computing because you are not asking for so many things daily, that Amazon is delivering this package and that package. So ultimately, we are saving trees and in a way, indirectly, but significantly, it also reduces the carbon footprint. Um, the major benefits to summarize are it is very cost effective because you access the cloud, you use the cloud only on the need basis. So whenever you are in demand of that, you simply go and use that. For example, it's a very popular joke, or maybe I have heard that even from my friends. One of the person actually went to one of the person from a very wealthy Middle East family went to study in Western world, and there one day he called his father and said, "Father, I'm feeling very embarrassed." Father asked why. He, see, I always go to my university or the college in my own car, whereas people come using metros or trains or other public transport. I feel very embarrassed. Father said, "Beta, don't worry." And next day, some $1 million were transferred. You go and buy your own train. So it's like, whenever you need computing, do you really need specialist computing daily? No, it all depends when you need it. So whenever you need any specialist computing or specialized computing, you go and use cloud. Otherwise, you simply do the job at your own and without, bothering others. It's a win-win situation for both the people. At the cloud users end, she doesn't need to buy the entire infrastructure on her own. It saves money. On the cloud service providers, and they are professional players working only towards providing services, so the services will be provided in a cheaper fashion. Another advantage is, since you are paying by use or paying as per the bits that you have used, the organization or the individual user is billed only for the computational resources they have actually used. As far as the computing cost is concerned, we say that it is comprising of two parts. Infrastructure cost is there, operational cost is there. So in the case of cloud computing, the user is relieved of any infrastructure cost. They need not to set up anything. They need to pay only the operational cost, which is very important, especially for the young entrepreneurs when they want to set up a new business. In that case, rather than setting up their own infrastructure, they simply use the cloud, and if they're successful, they can make their own cloud. Scalability, elasticity is there. It means that when you need scalability is actually the property of the system in which even if you increase the number of components, the performance is maintained. So in the case of cloud, with the provisioning of services or resources is very rapid. So it's totally scalable. It's totally elastic. Elastic means whenever you need more, you get more. Whenever you need less, the resources again will be deprovisioned, will be taken away from you. Another property of cloud being successful is that it is very agile. It means that the infrastructure can be very quickly provisioned whenever it is required. It won't be the case that the things are very slow and you are simply waiting for the resources to be provisioned. If you remember, maybe 5, 6 years back or so, whenever Flipkart used to come up with their big billion sale, what happened was sometimes users were not able to place the orders, or even when orders were getting placed, the order was not getting confirmed. But nowadays, we have come through a lot of experience and research. Nowadays, clouds are really efficient. They are very fast. The provisioning is very quick. Again, the major benefits are you are anywhere and you can basically use the cloud services anywhere and everywhere. Uh, Again, it follows the multi-tenancy model. That means say the same module can be used by many people. But security in a way is a challenge, because we say clouds are normally very, very, very secured or very highly secured. But still, we have seen a few examples in which, for example, people say American presidential elections were rigged. That means they breached. They were actually blaming Russia for that, USSR for that. But in a way, cloud faces certain security challenges in the sense that an application can attack the application. An application which is executing in a cloud can attack the platform. The platform can attack the application. Platform can attack another platform. Likewise, certain security challenges are there. But in spite of all these things, we say it's not that easy to hack into any cloud. But other problems might be there. For example, you are leasing your data, you are leasing the services from a cloud. So what happens to your data which is being held by the cloud? Those issues are there. But in general, cloud is very secured. So in general, if you want to talk about cloud challenges, we say costing or cost analysis is a concern. Since user is paying for only operational cost, how much should be that cost? Uh, Even communication cost should be taken into consideration, because ultimately the backbone of all the communication is the internet. Whenever you are adding new services to the cloud, in that case, integration cost also comes into picture. Mm, Even there is the penalty cost involved whenever, for example, I have offered to use the services of the cloud and I'm paying for more, but at the given moment of time I'm using less resources. Then in that case, what will happen? The penalty I have to bear, because I have asked for the resources, even though I'm not using it. Since they have been issued in my name, I need to pay for that. Even the resource pooling and multi-tenancy makes the entire analysis a little complicated. One very important thing that is involved in the case of cloud computing is the service level agreement. Basically, service level agreement is a legal document that is there between the consumer and the provider. And in that case, it really states the conditions and the constraints for a given service, that how much services the given uh, cloud will be offering, and what the user will be getting. In a case the services are below par, or they are not meeting the service level agreement, then in that case penalties can happen. Another thing is like cloud scalability is an issue, interoperability is an issue, standardization is an issue. Why? See, it's very easy to say that cloud can be scaled to any number of resources, but how to do that becomes an issue. Interoperability, for example, I want to move my data, or I want to have an access to both the Microsoft cloud and as well as, let's say, Amazon cloud. So can I really interoperate, because the standards that both might be using will be entirely different? Then in that case, how to do that? Even people talk about federation of cloud and inter-cloud structure, but coming together and offering services is not that simple. It's very challenging. It's like, people with their own personal interests coming together and offering you something. So each person needs to get some benefit, otherwise nothing beneficial is going to come out of it. So it's like, if even if certain services are offered, they will offer you services, or they will make discounts only when the old philosophy of you scratch my back, I scratch yours will be met. That comes, that brings me to what is the important thing in the case of cloud, which is known as resource provisioning. Now, what do you mean by resource provisioning? In general, I say it is to supply a set of computing resources for maybe processing and storing data. How do you get that becomes an issue? How do you decide which resources fit enough for you? How do you decide what should be the location of the resource that is being offered to you? What should be the cost of the resources that is being given to you? Uh, the method has to satisfy certain constraints. What all those constraints are? These constraints are like time limit. How much is the time for which you can use the resources? What is the budget of the user enabling her to make use of the cloud resources? How do we maximize the quality of service without breaching any service level agreement contract? Since we say everything is being accessed using internet, it becomes a little unpredictable in demand. Hardware and software failures are norms and not exceptions in the case of cloud. And there are various conflicts in the case of service level agreement which can create problems. Then who will be responsible for that? Mm, this is the reason actually resource provisioning is very important, that we go for auction mechanisms or cloud economics. Since ultimately it all becomes the game of demand and supply. If you go for a normal static pricing scheme, it has its own problem. But anyways, we'll be coming on to that. Just a very brief introduction on what do you understand by cloud, Internet of Things, and peers. Is there any relation between them? Although, again, This is not my purpose of discussion. Just to give a holistic view to my presentation, I am actually offering to discuss all these things. So what happens here is another thing which has come nowadays, another popular paradigm which has emerged nowadays is the use of Internet of Things. Even our Prime Minister is talking about smart cities. Everyone is talking about smart world. As far as Internet of Things is concerned, it is a term which was coined by Kevin Ashton at MIT, and Cisco estimates that it was born somewhere between 2008 and 2009. So before realizing IoT, what was happening, there was only computational devices that were getting connected to the world. They were communicating in between for information sharing and for computational sharing. But in the case of Internet of Things, what happens is you get a host of physical objects which are really passive by themselves, but by the addition of sensors to them or other embedded devices, uh, other electronics or softwares, these objects are able to collect and exchange data. Why it is very important to have things like Internet of Things available to us? We say uh, to really have something which we can do proactively rather than reactively, it's very important to have the base of information available to us. For those people who are from the computer science background, they might be aware about the data and that knowledge triangle. So ultimately, what happens is you have the data, you gain some knowledge, you have some information, and finally you get that wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge plus experience. So ultimately, what we say, more data, more information, more knowledge, and more wisdom. For example, I give you a very basic example. Let's say every one of us is using mobile phones nowadays. They have many sensors associated to it. Now, what happens is all these phones can maybe record the seismic activity at a given place in a given geographical zone. This information, which can be collected through mobile phones over internet, gives the idea that the data can be analyzed to find out whether there is going to be any earthquake or there is going to be any unpredictable seismic activity in the next future. So that's the beauty of Internet of Things. It makes us more proactive rather than reactive, although it has its own challenges that are there. Uh, it is expected that the number of things that are going to be connected to the internet is going to cross nearly 20 billion in the near future. But in general, we say it is a unification of many technologies which we are now talking about. It is the backbone of any Internet of Thing is, in my opinion, it's always cloud computing. Because even though such a huge amount of data is getting generated, but still, is it possible that without any proper cloud support, that data can be analyzed? Because continuously IoT devices will be generating the data. Where the data will be processed, that becomes an issue. So it's not, IoT is not something which is really replacing a computing paradigm. It is only adding to that. It is only complementing them. So ultimately, we are bound to live in a world in which cloud computing is there. We talk about IoT, we talk about big data, we talk about machine learning, we talk about networking and so on. Another popular term which has come into existence nowadays when people talk about computer communication is the case of fog computing. In the case of fog computing, see, basically the problem is even if you're sending some data to cloud for any processing, it takes some time. The network might be slow. In that case, the data will never reach. But assuming that the network is doing good, but still certain time delay will be there in passing that data from your system to the cloud. For example, somebody is driving a car and the accident reaction to the accident, what happens when, God forbid, the owner meets any accident in the car happens, then in that case, what should happen? Now, if you send that crash data to cloud and it gets processed there and it reverts back to the owner of the cloud, by the time the owner will be dead. By the time decision will be taken, the owner will be dead. So why it is important to have some system like fog and cloud is that we need to have something in which we can have the computing close to the source of the data or close to the computing devices or the computing nodes which are participating in the process. In the case of fog, what happens is the computing is moved towards the computational nodes. For example, you might be having a railway line and one node could be deployed there. It might be doing some computation at the local and immediately it will be transferred to you. So if you talk about special computational nodes at the LAN level, you have fog. But on the other hand, if you talk about computing to be done near the source of the data instead of relaying it to the cloud or maybe even to the LAN, in that case, we talk about what we know as edge computing, in which the nodes which are generating the data, the routers, the data exchange mechanism, networking components, they also come into picture. The benefits are basically they reduce the latency in servicing. Um, so in general, if you say you have a system in which at the end you have cloud, in between you have fog nodes, you have edge nodes. If it is possible that the decision can be made only in the at the device itself, again, there are certain constraints like devices might not be very capable because they might be having insufficient bandwidth, they might be having insufficient processing speed, they might be having insufficient memory, which is obviously the case. You cannot compete with the cloud at the node end. But still, if for smaller applications, if it is possible that the computing can be done locally, edge can be used. Otherwise, at the middle level, you go with cloud, and otherwise you go with, otherwise you go with fog, and then for delay sensitive non-delay sensitive applications in which certain delay can be tolerated, you go with what we call as the cloud computing. In between, people have already introduced one more layer, which is known as, I'm simply skipping this slide, fog versus edge, because I really do not want to take your time. And I really know how people feel when you are there in the lunch duration, in lunch time. So fog versus edge, I'm simply skipping. Again, people have coined another term which is very popular nowadays, which is mist computing. So this is a general comparison between cloud computing and fog computing, and then finally edge and mist computing. And depending on which kind of application is there, ultimately that computing paradigm and architecture you will use. Okay, fair enough. So I would like to say the basic part of my presentation is to focus on resource provisioning. We say cloud offers you a lot of resources, but a lot of users are also there. So the main problem is how to do something in which efficiently you are able to distribute the computational or networking or storage resources among various users. That is what you call as resource provisioning, and that becomes a problem. Before going into resource provisioning, although we have discussed quite a little about it, but what do you mean by job scheduling? Sometimes people say you go for job scheduling. Sometimes people say this is resource allocation. So resource provisioning or resource allocation depends on how the jobs are scheduled. For example, first in, first out is a scheduling policy. Uh, Smallest job on the fastest node becomes a resource provisioning scheme. Uh, Up till now, we have been using this term job scheduler. Okay, people might be aware of that. I'm not talking about, that people are not aware of that. But the basic purpose of using any computer is to use it as a scheduler or task allocator. So from the operating system point of view, why scheduling is important, we say we want to keep the CPU busy all the time. That means since CPU is a very scarce quantity, it is actually the core of computing. And what you want to keep it busy most of the time. That means, for example, any input output activity is there, you really do not want to make the CPU wait. So for that, what you do, you have people have introduced various measures, like multitasking is there, multi-programming is there, introduction of buffers is there, hierarchical memory system is there. So these things are there to ensure that the CPU is busy all the time. But whenever you talk about paradigms like grid and cloud computing, in that case, job scheduling is a little different. In that case, we say job scheduling means mapping of the jobs on the available resources while, number one, please note down, while meeting the job requirements or while meeting the nature of the job, because it is very important that what the nature of the job is, accordingly resources should be provisioned to that. So accordingly, number one step in resource provisioning is matching resources to as per the job's requirement should be made, number one. The order of execution of jobs and in turn sub jobs should be respected. That means level one job should be executed first, and those modules or sub jobs or subtasks which are dependent on the preceding modules should be executed next. Uh, in operating systems, how do we do that? We do it using what we call as synchronization, synchronization, or hardware locks, or semaphores, and so on. But in this case, you need to make sure that everything is synchronized in the way that the second module, which is dependent on the first module, should not start before the first one. And then there is certainly communication requirement between all these job modules. So how do you take care of that? For example, if you schedule the job modules which demands high amount of computation to those nodes which are separated quite a lot, in which a number of links and routers are there for communication. In that case, what will happen? The communication cost will supersede the computational cost. So that kind of scheduling doesn't actually benefit us at all. So our purpose of job scheduling or resource provisioning is that we need to provision the resources to the jobs in such a way that they are appropriate and they are not harmful to the resource provider too. Resource provider also makes some money out of it. That is very important. In general, the optimization parameters that we use in the case of cloud or any parallel computing paradigm is like it could be minimization of the turnaround time, it could be maximization of reliability, it could be maximization of security, or maybe any other quality of service parameter, or maybe even a combination of all these parameters is possible. So that is the objective. Sometimes it is simply, I want to use the resources, that's all. In general, we say scheduling is an NP class of problem in which we say that these problems are not solvable in polynomial time on deterministic machines, but they are verifiable in polynomial time. And even certain classifications are there in the case of resource provisioning to be NP complete, or sometimes people say it is NP hard. Accordingly, the definition is there in front of you. Oh, so that brings me to part 3 of my presentation, which is cloud and economics. How do you relate cloud to market? I would like to repeat my statement, which I made in the beginning of my presentation, that cloud is nothing but a business paradigm in which some services are offered to the users on pay-as-you-go model. So it's like, again, a shop in which some services are being offered to the user. Now the thing is, for that shop to survive, what is important? Maybe the services should be unique. Maybe the services should be affordable. Maybe the experience of using those services should be pleasant. From the user point of view, another parameter which comes into picture is that the prices should be affordable to the user, that should fit in the pocket. So accordingly, what we say, cloud should also follow the economies or the cloud services model based on demand and supply. Now we say, if you are offering a cloud services, a cloud service which is really unique in itself, So if there is no demand, even though you are offering some unique service, it doesn't matter. Nobody is going to buy that, and your cloud will break down. Your economics will simply collapse. So ultimately, it all boils down to demand and supply principle, which I have stated earlier too. Now, why economics is so much important to cloud? Economics is important to cloud because single pricing mechanism is never optimal. That means if I'm offering some service and if I keep the price static, I say, okay, always I'm selling the mobile and always the price will be same. See, when the technology is new, at that time, maybe people will buy the mobile at a escalated higher cost. But when new technology is evolving, if I'm selling the same mobile at the older cost, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody is going to buy that. And if nobody is going to buy, how my cloud services will survive? For cloud services to survive, it is important that both the cloud service provider and cloud user should benefit out of it. Otherwise, this kind of matching will not work. So we say cloud economics or cloud auctioning becomes a business paradigm in which pricing acts as a lever or the control mechanism. Since it is a market, which all participants will be there, two participants will be there. Cloud providers, a set of people who are offering you cloud services, and another set of people who are basically the customers or the end users, or known as cloud users. Now, what are the objectives of cloud provider? The objective of cloud provider will be to provide the resources, to offer the services, to maximize the revenue, to maximize the utilization, to remain in business, to survive. On the other hand, what are the objectives of the cloud user? For the cloud user, it doesn't matter that whether cloud service provider is making money or not. It wants to get the resources at a minimum cost. It wants to maximize the satisfaction that, yeah, even if I'm paying for certain services, this much amount, but I feel satisfied. Like people pay 70,000 rupees, 80,000, 1.5 lakhs for buying iPhones. So as long as they are satisfied, it's fine. Satisfaction is very important. On the other hand, there is another set of people who are really happy with buying phones, which is costing not more than 7,000 rupees. So what do you mean? The main aim is to design an effective and efficient auction-based resource provisioning for pricing models. The objectives will be for provider. The objective becomes to maximize the revenue and the utilization of resources. For users, it will be like how to offer best pricing and satisfaction. It is very important that we need to satisfy both the cloud user and the cloud service provider in terms of both cost and quality of service. Then only this model will survive. Now, what is the issue with the resource provisioning and pricing, which actually becomes the motivation for this talk and our work, which has been done earlier by our team. Dynamic pricing is very important because if the demand is more, you need to increase the price so that the resource provider should also not be deprived of making money. Utilization of spare resources. See, I have made a shop. I go to a mall in which I say one entire floor is empty, no shop is there. Then what is the use of such kind of a mall? Utilization of spare resources is very important. Then you need to look for policies by which you will go for resource provisioning in such a competitive and strategic market like cloud. See, you are not the only one who is offering cloud services. Others are also there in the market. So in that case, it is very important that you design or the mechanism or you devise your strategy of selling your services in such a way that you make the people happy and you also make money. But whenever you talk about cloud services or any pricing mechanism, truthful revelation becomes very important. What do you mean by truthful revelation? For example, the cloud service provider will say, see, I'm offering you this service and okay, this is the cost of the service, which is very escalated. And what in turn they are offering you very inferior services. So how do you know they are truthful? Similarly, user will say, no, I'll pay only this much price because I do not need it. But in turn, she is actually quite in need of that. Or maybe the user will say, okay, I'll pay you, maybe 2 crore rupees for one VM instance, a very small VM instance. So does it look practical? So truthful revelation, both from the user side and the cloud service provider side, is very important. And it is very important again to maintain healthy competition in the market. It should not be the case that one dominant player is there and others are always getting starved of the opportunity to sell their products. And then finally, spot pricing in cloud ecosystem is there, but I'll come on to that later. Uh, as far as the pricing of cloud resources is there, basically, you have two models. First one is the static pricing, in which always prices will be fixed. And the other one is dynamic pricing, in which the prices are changing based on the demand. As far as static pricing is concerned, basically it has two different versions. The first one is reservation-based pricing, which is also known as fixed pricing. And the other one is on-demand pricing, which actually is based on pay-as-you-go model. I'll come on to that. And the other variant of the pricing is completely dynamic, in which you go with spot pricing. Again, I would, come on to that because I'm saying dynamic pricing at two places, in static pricing as well as in the other category of dynamic pricing. Let me come on to that. First, let me talk about reservation or fixed price mechanism, or which is also known as pre-decided pricing mechanism for cloud components. See, for example, a cloud service provider is there. She might be having a number of underlying resources, hardware, software, networking. There is one possibility that she offers the cloud services based on a fixed price. So reservation is the same thing, in which you say, I'll reserve these resources for you if you pay me beforehand a fixed price. So always, whenever you want, those resources will be made available to you. Like in the mall, I go, I say, I want to book this particular shop area for maybe 1 year or so. So what happens is, in the case of a reservation-based system, cloud customer requests for the cloud's resources for a longer duration from the cloud service provider and pays one-time cost, or maybe in monthly or equated form, the cost for the same. The qualities of a reservation-based system is, the cloud service provider is pretty sure who is going to be the user. User is pretty sure that whenever she needs, she'll get the resources. The price is more predictable. User is pretty much aware. Provider is also pretty much aware that this is the revenue I'm going to get. So it becomes more stable. Even the customer is able to decide beforehand whether the services which she is going to buy falls under her budget or not. But everything is not that simple or that good. There are certain problems available with the reservation-based system. Let's say if you see the figure on the right-hand side, there is a demand which is seen fluctuating over a period of time. In this case, the time is in terms of days. So what happens is, initially, the demand is increasing, it is reaching its peak and again decreasing and then increasing and then decreasing. This crest and trough is continuously repeated. Now we say, if the user wants to avail the services, what is important? The user should first decide about what is going to be the maximum capacity that is required by her. Let's say accordingly, she buys, she has bought the resources. But if you see, the demand sometimes is meeting the peak capacity requirements, and at many times it is not reaching the peak capacity requirements. So this is the penalty which the user is going to pay. If she is not able to utilize the entire capacity, it's no one's fault, but it's her own fault. Then in that case, what will happen? Even though she is not using the resources, but still she will be paying for that amount because she has reserved that. The other thing is, so user will say, okay, let me go with the under provisioning mechanism in which I reduce my capacity requirement because every time I'm not reaching that much capacity. But if you have provisioned lesser number of resources and your requirements increases for a time which is represented here by the cap of the curves cut through by the capacity line, it means what? You have under provisioned your resources. That means you need more for a certain amount of time, but you are not getting that much. It's uncertain whether you will get it or not. It becomes a problem. Many times, even the demand follows a different model. Like, at Christmas time, a lot of demand will be there. New Year, a lot of demand is there. Festival time, a lot of demand is there. But otherwise, the demand will be very less. So ultimately, the problem is how the user will decide that what is going to be the optimum capacity that she should buy so that she is never out of capacity or out of resources which have been provisioned to her. Becomes a problem. So over provisioning is a problem, under provisioning is a problem, and reservation is something. See, in this case, in the first case, even though the user is not using all the resources which have been allocated to her, but what the service provider will do, it cannot do anything, or it is not doing anything per se in this case. So what will happen? Even though the resources are lying unused or underutilized, um, this resource provider is simply happy by the sense that, okay, I have got the money in advance and it doesn't matter to me what happens next. Um, that brings me to second category of static pricing, which is based on the demand and supply, which is beneficial for both provider and the user. So what they do is, at a given moment of time, they say, the demand is more, I revise the price. The demand is less for this much moment of time, I revise the price. So what happens is, if there is under provisioning, one can pool more resources on demand, but the user is going to pay more cost as compared to the reservation plan. In the case of over provisioning, what will happen? The resources will be taken back, and accordingly, the cost will come down a little. But the problem is how to match this uh, resource requirement curve, which actually we have done in the previous slide. So we say, if we go with demand pricing, what will happen? The resource provider or the cloud service provider will definitely earn more. What the user will benefit, the benefit of the user will be, if she is not using something, she is not paying for that. But so even though if there is any demand in the future for extra number of resources, maybe the user will be able to buy those services at a maybe escalated cost to an extent. But we say in the reservation plan, a cloud user has to pay less in comparison with on-demand plan, true. But ultimately, the problem is if she is not using the resources, she's paying for even those resources which she is not using. Research is saying that reservation plan can save provisioning cost up to 49% if the resources are fully utilized. But if the resources are not fully utilized, ultimately you end up paying more than the on-demand model. So this brings me to another pricing mechanism, which is known as spot pricing mechanism. Let me come to the previous scenario in which what happens is a reservation plan has been opted by the user. So for a given user, a certain number of user resources based on the capacity requested by the user have been allocated. Now, what happens is, at a given moment of time or at any given duration of time, the user is not making use of all the resources that have been allocated to her. Now, what are the choices in front of the cloud service provider? One choice is the cloud service provider can simply forget about it. Okay, what can I do? If you're not using it, it's none of my business. On the other hand, the cloud service provider can be a little cheat In other words, you can say that she can be a little intelligent. In that sense, what she will do, she will offer the unutilized reserved capacity of the users to general public. What they will say, okay, these instances are available to you, but the quality of service associated with these instances is very low and hence the cost. That means for those VM instances or resources which you are paying much more in the case of reservation based system or on demand based system, these instances are offered to you at a very low cost, but without any quality of service. That means what will happen? If you buy those services and in between the original user of those resources demands for those resources back, within no time, those resources will be taken back from you and you will pay for only the amount of time which you have used for those resources. But it is not bad in the sense, for example, if the resources are not getting used by the cloud resource provider, she's making extra money out of it by selling it maybe at a lesser cost. It's like, shop in the mall is available. Ultimately, mall will be the owner, but somebody must have, leased it. What you will do till the user comes and use it, you give it to somebody else with the condition that whenever the original user is coming, you have to vacate the space. So it becomes beneficial for the user. It is beneficial that if you have the instances which are not time critical, which are not really time sensitive, then in that case, you can make use of those resources at a very low cost. Consider the situation in which if the virtual machine is created and it's not allocated, what happens? It's a wastage of resources of the data center, ultimately a loss to the cloud service provider. Similarly, if a virtual machine is created on a physical machine, the entire physical machine is and not the part of it is at stake. Therefore, what do we do? At the provider side, the large number of spare resources should be allocated to the customers to make better utilization of the resources, to make more money for the resource service provider. And at the same time, customers are attracted to these services because the cost of these services is really low. Okay, so this brings me to fourth part of my presentation, which is cloud auction being in action. As far as auction is concerned, auctioning has a very long history, and it was reportedly used in Babylon as early as 500 BC. And history says that the entire Roman Empire was sold off using auction is in 193 AD. Reference number 83 you can see from the book which I'll tell you later. But in general, how we have heard about auction? Every year we hear about this auction when IPL auctions are taking place. Kane Williamson being sold in so many crores, Chris Gale being sold in so many crores, and this person not sold in anything. So that ugly auction in the case of IPL, people say because when the country is going through such a traumatic phase and still this IPL kind of thing is happening. Okay, ethics apart, we hear about this auction quite a lot. Sotheby's auction is quite popular. But as far as technical definition of auction is concerned, author G. Anandalingam has said that it is a mechanism of information submission together with rules for assigning items and payments to participants based on this submitted information. Ultimately, again, it follows the same demand and supply principle in which if the demand is increasing and supply is less, price will increase and so on. But ultimately, it is actually a price discovery mechanism in which people can participate, maybe from the user side, maybe from the provider side, or maybe from both the sides. So as far as auction is concerned, as I've already said, it is a mechanism to realize a dynamic pricing. We say a market mechanism is known as auction if it has a set of rules in which certain prices will be determined for the resources which are available for allocation based on certain bids. The bids can be from any of the participants. Uh, so the beauty of auction is it allows the participants in the price discovery, maybe from the user side, maybe from the provider side, or maybe both. Again, it aims to optimize the payoff of the participants in the sense that if you're participating, either you get it or you do not lose anything. And winners will obviously be praised with their winning abilities, and losers will be blamed uh, while by other bidders by not winning actually that. Uh, okay. In general, broadly, I say that auction is of three types: forward auction, reverse auction, and double auction. But again, I'll come on to that. Let me first begin with what are the various entities involved in auction, which is in the context of cloud computing or even per se. Number one is seller, which is the owner of the commodities. Number two is the buyer, which is the end customer, which will use the commodities which have been sold by the seller. The third entity is auctioneer, which is actually an intermediary or the market maker, which controls the entire auction process. Sometimes the seller itself can be the auctioneer, but otherwise, many times it is possible, depending on the auction type, that an auctioneer or the intermediary is required. The various steps which are there in the case of auction are first, you need to have a mechanism for bid collection and validation. What happens in the case of bid collection is that certain rules and constraints will be specified. For example, the bid will open this time, or maybe what is the bid expiry date, or which all resources are available, what is the bidder's budget, and what is the time period. Once the time bid is expired, or the time period for bid collection is expired, the auction will be said to be closing. When the auction will close, it might be, based on time that, okay, after maybe 2 hours it will close, or maybe on the sufficient number of bids received, or maybe the time limit is specified for bidding has elapsed, or maybe the availability of resources is exhausted. In that case, the auction will close. Once the auction is closed, then the next step will be how to determine the valuation. That is done by bid ranking. What happens is whatever bids have been received, they will be sorted, maybe in the ascending order or maybe in the descending order to make certain decisions. Similarly, the resources can also be ranked based on their intrinsic values. For example, by using certain apps like Book My Show, I want to book a movie ticket. So what happens is initially the tickets will be at a cheaper rate for the certain block of seats. And once that block has been exhausted, the value of seats will increase and I need to pay more for the next block. Even on the dynamic pricing, which is applied in certain trains also, it follows the same thing. Based on the bids, based on the valuation, based on the resource ranking, we finally go with the winner determination. Who is the winner or who are the winners? And accordingly, the resources will be allocated to them. And finally, we go with payment mechanism that it will specify how the payment will be made by the winner. Again, as far as the categorization of auction is concerned, it is based on many parameters. First, for example, on the basis of role of the participants. It can be like forward auction is there, reverse auction is there, or double auction is there. In the case of forward auction, what happens is bidders will be bidding for the resources being sold by the cloud service provider. In the case of reverse auction, what happens is cloud service providers will bid for to sell their resources to the number of cloud users. In the case of double auction, what happens is both the cloud service providers and the users will participate in price discovery or in the auction process. On the basis of bidding side also, the auction can be categorized as either one-side auction in which only one party is participating, or maybe double-side auction in which both the parties are participating. It can be on the basis of pricing mechanism, like first pricing. That means whoever has bid in the most optimal way. For example, if from the user point of view, the minimum price, from the provider point of view, the highest price. So based on that, first price will be taken into consideration and the winner will be decided. But many times it has been observed or it has been reported in the literature that first pricing mechanism is not truthful mechanism. That means the service provider and the user will not disclose their fair price based on first pricing. So many times people use second pricing mechanism. In that case, what happens is the winner will pay not the highest price which has been placed in the bid, but the second highest price. Maybe if you're talking about ascending order, then the second from the top or the bottom, it depends actually whether you're talking about the cloud service user or the provider. For provider, obviously, maximization of price is important, but in that case, in second pricing mechanism, second best price will be paid by the user, winning user. And similarly, in the case of forward auction, for example, minimization of prices are important for the user. So in that case, the second highest price will be paid by the user. Similarly, you can go ahead with the K pricing mechanism in which not the second, but the kth price will be paid by the user. There are certain mechanisms available for that. In the case of second pricing, the value of K is 2. But to ensure truthfulness in the system, there is a very popular mechanism for auction available, which is Vickery Clark Groves VCG auction. In that case, what happens is everybody places the bid for various entities, and various combinations of those bids will be made, and it will be determined how how actually the resource service provider is gaining the most, and what is benefiting the cloud service cloud users also. So accordingly, there is a penalty mechanism available that by using the best price, if you take it away, and what is the remaining best combination available, and that is going to be the price. But I'll not go into those details because that itself requires 1 hour of lecture to make it clear. But in general, actually, in our resource provisioning models, we have used VCG mechanisms to allocate the resources to make it truthful. Again, on the basis of resources, also auction can be classified like if it is a single unit, single item, that means only one kind of virtual machine is being offered, and the package itself is of only one size. It is possible that the same item is there, but multiple quantities are there. For example, multiple CPU cycles, but again, it's the same. In the case of multi-item single unit, you make a bundle in which multiple items are there. For example, certain CPU cycles will be there, certain memory requirements, RAM specification will be there, certain network bandwidth will be there. Similarly, you can go with the multi-unit and multi-item in which multiple units are available and multiple items are there corresponding to that. On the basis of bid composition, also auctions can be categorized like if it is a uni-attribute or multi-attribute. In the case of uni-attribute, it's only the price which will decide who is going to be the winner. But in the case of multi-attribute, it's not only the price, but other quality of service parameters that are also taken into consideration to determine the winner. Again, one more category is whether you're going for the sealed bid mechanism, which typically we do in the case of our university auctioning or bid placements. So we place the bids at discrete rounds. Maybe technical bid is there, and then financial bid is there, and then finally, whichever is the highest amount or whichever is the lowest, depending on that, accordingly, the winner will be decided. In the case of dynamic bidding, what happens is pricing can adapt with other prices for every stage. Others will also know, and they can change their prices at every stage, but the process becomes very slow. Another one is English auction, which is like a Sotheby's auction. You start from a reserve price and you ask if there is any bidder which is really ready to increase the bid price, and accordingly you keep on increasing the bid price till you get the highest or the maximum benefit. And the other way out is using a descending auction, in which you start from the highest price and you keep on reducing the price till you get the buyer. In general, there are certain auction properties which are really important. For example, efficiency is very important. The auction should be efficient. That means the business should be done only with the best participants, and there is no loss in social welfare. That means even though you are dealing with the best participants, it's not like that you are demotivating others to participate. The auction should be incentive compatible. That means the maximum utility will be offered to the winner with truthful bidding. That means if you are bidding truthfully, then in that case you will get maximum benefit. Otherwise, you will be penalized. Bidders' optimality, best possible price should be there. Individual rationality. That means even if you are not winning, there is no harm to the participants. That means you are offering non-negative utility. So either you are a winner or a loser. In case even if you are a loser, you do not lose anything. The auction should be budget balanced. That means the sum of the money transferred to all the participants should be equal to zero. There should not be any leakage. Then finally, it is fairness, which we also call as egalitarian social welfare, which actually how to reduce the difference between the bidders, rich bidders and the poor bidders, to make it more socially welfare, or maybe to make it more fair, so that people are not discouraged that say somebody is very dominant and how can I participate because I'm bound to lose. Basically, now in part 5, whatever I'm going to discuss is taken from the book published by these authors, actually the authors which I mentioned in the very beginning. So we have even come up with a book in Springer Briefs. So again, to brief you, why auction is required in cloud computing, it is for the utilization of the spare resources, for dynamic price implementation. It prevents market manipulations. But do we really use auction in today's world? Yes, we use that. Amazon offers you spot instances in terms of EC2. Even Spot Cloud is there, which has been now acquired by Virtustream. Even Moda Cloud is there. They are all offering you cloud resources based on auction mechanism. Let me bring on to our research contribution. The first paper actually I'm going to discuss is spot pricing in cloud computing. We have already discussed about cloud mechanism, or spot market-based cloud auction mechanism. Ultimately, again, just to brief you, basically there is some capacity which has been reserved to be used by a user. That user is not using those services to the full. So that unutilized capacity, cloud service provider is again selling as a spot pool. And those instances or virtual machines or resources are known as spot instances. So how the spot instant mechanism is used? User will place a request with a bid value. If the user's bid exceeds the spot price, user will get the instance. Otherwise, user itself will terminate the instance in the case that either it doesn't need those instances or it will be terminated abruptly by the cloud service provider if the spot price will exceed the user's bid at a given moment of time. So user will be only charged with the amount of resources that it has used at a given moment of time. This is an example of the spot instances provided by Amazon EC2. Like, you have standard instances, you have medium instances, you have high CPU instances, and accordingly, the price will also vary. Some general rules are, if the user terminates the instances in the latest partial hour, the user has to pay for the whole hour. But if the service provider terminates the instances in latest partial hour because of out of bid situation, or the situation in which the original user has come back, then in that case, the user need not to pay anything. The basic thing is Amazon informs, Amazon is the dominant player. It informs the user at least 2 minutes before the scheduled termination. So it makes it suitable for applications with flexible start and stop time. For example, data modeling is there, analysis, processing. It results in cost saving. I've already discussed that, but the challenges are actually how to model the spot prices. Even as of now, Amazon has not actually made public any of the spot pricing mechanism that they are using. So people are only speculating based on the prices which have been published in the some consideration of past years or so. And how to make it fault tolerant, because if you're abruptly terminating something, it gives a bad impression. So it's something, this is the user bid. If the spot price is below, then lower than that, the user will get the resources. Otherwise, if the spot price is increasing the user price, in that case, completely the spot instance will be taken away. Basically, this is a small chart which gives you an idea of how spot price modeling has been done. See, I'm not actually a mathematics or statistician, specialization in mathematics, nothing like that. But I basically actually work more with a more focus on computational aspects. So if you want to actually have a more detailed view of all these things, you people can look into the ins and outs. For example, spot pricing modeling can be done based on economic based modeling, which is auction is a part of that. Game theoretic modeling is there. Even statistics based modeling is there. Optimization based modeling is there, in which meta heuristics will be used. Based on the bidding strategy, the strategies used will be like it could be statistics based, or it could be economics based, and so on. It depends actually how you look at the problem and what is more appropriate. Let me first talk about forward auction. Uh, as we've already discussed, forward auction is known as the sell side auction, in which multiple buyers are there which are competing to get the resources from a single seller. Uh, what happens is the cloud buyers will compete by bidding their valuations for a required quantity of resources, and cloud provider, depending on how to maximize the revenue, will decide who is going to be the winner. This type of cloud market environment can be modeled using forward auction, in which bidding is happening only from the user side. So what are the various design goals and auction properties in this particular case? Basically, there are two phases involved: allocation phase and the pricing phase. Allocation is how much to allocate, and finally, if you're allocating something, how to decide about the price. Can you keep the price static? How to keep the price dynamic? This becomes very important. So ultimately, how do you discover the price uh, for the given allocation is the major goal of forward auction. So the pricing will depend on the way in which the resource allocation is done, and the outcome of the pricing phase will depend on the allocation phase. So basically, these two are interdependent problems, and whatever forward allocation mechanism you develop need to address both of these. Um, Again, truthfulness is very important while designing the forward auction based mechanism, and our research has put emphasis on that. How we made it truthful by the use of VCG mechanism. If you see the VCG mechanism, maybe by browsing the literature, you'll know that basically it involves some penalty. So if somebody is not bidding truthfully, she will not get the resources, and even if she is getting the resources, she has to pay a certain amount of penalty. This is the way actually it looks. A cloud user is there at one end with a certain number of users. A spot pricing mechanism is there. Some spot instances are being offered by the cloud provider. So the cloud provider will collect the bid from the users. What the bid constitution composition will be. Instance type will be mentioned, number of instances, an availability zone, and bid value, etc. will be mentioned. Based on that, provider will calculate the allocation and the payment for various users. It will decide about the winning users, and finally the spot instance will be provided. The opposite mechanism is the reverse auction based mechanism, which we have actually done in this paper by my colleagues. Here what happens is the provider will act as a bidder. Now, since the provider is selling something, it cannot be the auctioneer. In that case, what you require is another entity will come, which will come into picture other than buyer and provider, which is the cloud auctioneer. So how the reverse auction will take place? The cloud auctioneer will first begin the auction process by informing both the cloud customer and the provider. The cloud customer will submit the requirement. The auctioneer will publish the requirement to the cloud provider. Accordingly, the cloud providers will submit the bid. Cloud auctioneer will acknowledge the bid. And once the conditions are met, the auction will close. And finally, the result will be declared by the cloud auctioneer and it will be published to both cloud customer and the provider. Once the winners are decided, accordingly, the cloud providers will allocate to those customers who are the winners and they will pay accordingly to the cloud service provider. In the paper, actually, we discussed about this thing that the cloud procurement cost with the increasing number of providers will come down because of the increase in competition. And even if the range of offered quantity is increasing, you buy more, you get lesser cost. So the resource procurement cost will come down in that case too. Finally, this brings me to the last part of this presentation, which is the double auction based cloud resource provisioning. In this case, actually, what is happening, both the cloud resource providers and the cloud users are competing together. So ultimately, what will happen, users will compete with each other to obtain the limited amount of resources, and the providers will compete with each other to offer their services in order to increase their revenue. So ultimately, there is a competition from both the sides. Users are competing to minimize the cost. Providers are competing to offer the services while maximizing their revenue. So this kind of auction is known as double auction. What are the various benefits of double auction? The benefits are it actually corresponds more to the matching problem in which both the parties are party to decide about the price discovery. Further, it prevents the monopoly both from the service provider side as well as the cloud customer side, and is more computationally and economically efficient. As far as the applicability is concerned, the double auction is, as of now, a futuristic scenario, but some actual implementations have been there. But it depends on many factors like interoperability, because many cloud providers are coming together, they are offering something. Interoperability is a big issue, bringing people to the common platform. But still, a good number of inter-cloud projects are going on. For example, Moda Cloud is there, Cloud for SOA is there, T Cloud is there, Remix is there. Why do we need a fair and multi-attribute combinatorial double auction model? Number one is QoS is a very important factor in cloud computing. So while optimizing QoS, reputation of the providers cannot be ignored. Why combinatorial is important? Because offering of resources in the form of virtual machines is there in the case of auctioning, but the customers are able to express their required resources, which are dependent as well as complementary. That's the reason it's combinatorial. Why double? Because it avoids the monopoly both by the cloud users and both by the cloud service providers. Nobody is having any monopoly because ultimately everyone is competing with everyone. So this is one paper actually which we have done in the case of double auction, which I've already told you. The problem is designing the multi-attribute combinatorial double auction that aims to optimize the payoff of the participants by maximizing their revenue in the long run and allocation of resources to the customers with the least price and with the best possible quality of service. Again, multi-attribute, it has to be there because it's not like that, always you offer the standard packages like 2 CPU cycles, 1 RAM, 1 GB of RAM, and 1 gigabit per second of bandwidth. User can identify, user can mention the resources. So ultimately it becomes a multi-attribute problem. So basically this is the framework for using cloud market using double auction, but I know I have already reached the end of this time limit at 2 o'clock. So this auction needs to complete now. So I would like to conclude with the fact that cloud has now become a marketplace where business needs to be done, and it's very popular and it's very efficient. So we need to have competitive mechanisms. So auction comes into picture. It also helps in dynamic pricing, improving the resource utilization, meeting both objective of the provider and the consumer. So auction is important and auction is really required by cloud. Uh, so putting together, actually, what we have done is actually we have offered novel solutions, keeping these economic aspects for cloud services. And Shukriya, Dante, thank you, gracias. And I'm open for questions if you are not really willing to rush for your lunch. Sir, over to you. Sir, I'm open for questions and answers, if anybody.
Yes, very informative session. It is a mix-up of AI, IoT, and parallel computing, as you belong to the parallel computing. There is one question, right, by that. Can you explore the scheduling algorithm used in the cloud systems and in ordinary parallel system, means interconnection network? How will you correlate these two things?
Okay, so basically, the major difference between what happens in the case of auction mechanism and the general resource provisioning in the case of cloud computing is the fact that when we talk about cloud computing resource provisioning, we simply talk about quality of service parameters. That means how much should be the response time, how much should be the turnaround time, how much security I'm getting. But in the case of auction, basically we are dealing with the benefits and interest of both the cloud service providers and the cloud users. So ultimately, like a reputation of cloud service provider becomes important. How actually you are discovering the price, that becomes important. In the case of normal cloud scheduling, we don't actually discover any price. But in the case of auctioning, we come up with the price which is beneficial to all.
Another question is there. What is the scope of using parallel systems in cloud?
Oh, definitely. Cloud is by nature parallel. So without, see, basically, whenever you talk about parallel and distributed computing, two components are there. Either it is parallel or it is distributed and parallel. Parallel means number of computing components are there in the same computer. They are sharing the underlying resources. Distributed systems are independent computers which are coming together to solve the problem. But independently, that individual computer could also be parallel. For example, I am having a system in which 10 computers are there and each computer is having 10 cores. So cloud computing by definition is parallel. Parallel is the nature. Without that, it doesn't make any sense.
When we say that infrastructure as a service, so can we apply the algorithms used in parallel computing there?
Yes, definitely. Ultimately, for example, if I'm using this auction mechanism, I'm talking about infrastructure as a service only in which certain resources are getting provisioned to the user, but at what cost? That cost is determined by auction.
And one question is from Shirin Zafar. Auctioning and ML, will it be enhanced utilization in current scenario?
Definitely, definitely. I told you, one slide in which various mechanisms were available. If I want to come on to that, yes, definitely. I spoke about meta heuristics also. See this particular thing. So in that case, machine learning, meta heuristics, they go together. Definitely.
Oh, very good slide. The full taxonomy is given over here.
Right.
Someone is asking about business intelligence.
Can she elaborate or he elaborate what they mean by that? What do they actually want in the terms of cloud computing?
I think she is asking auctioning and ML will enhance it. It is related with the previous question that utilization in the current scenario like business intelligence. What is upfront payment in cloud? This is another question. What is
It
upfront
depends
payment?
actually. It depends actually. See, sometimes what happens is to take part in a given auction, you have to pay some entry fee. But again, since it discourages people, it is possible that you design an auction mechanism in which no upfront fee is there. But again, it depends. If you go with the no upfront fee, it will be offering you one big disadvantage, which is known as the problem of the commons. See, if something is free to you, anybody can come and abuse the resources. So anybody can come and participate, even though the users are not interested. So just to discourage that, an upfront fee is there.
Is there any auctioning and security risk?
As far as auctioning is there, security risk is like, your information might be revealed. It's like, if a sealed information is there, sealed bidding is there, but somebody, using those scale and scissor mechanism, sometimes they cut and try to find out what is the minimum cost and they leak it to others. You have to assume this thing, you have to believe that the auctioneer is totally neutral. They'll not leak the information. You have to
She is
assume that.
asking that can blockchain be a solution for this?
Blockchain is mainly used for other purposes. Like in the case of blockchain, entire history is available,
Exactly.
used for authentication. So I'm not sure whether we can use blockchain here. I need to explore that.
Okay, fine, sir. Okay, if you have more questions, you can send it to me. That will be answered later because it's already 2:10 and this is the lunch time. I will say to all the participants, please have lunch at their places because we are virtually.
You are not saying
And
it to speakers, huh?
and thank you so much, sir, Zahid Saab, to be with us virtually. And in future, if everything goes well, we will definitely would like to call you in the campus. And in the near future also, I will expect full cooperation from your side. And thank you a lot for accepting our request to be the resource person in this FDP program.